Test, test, test. Hey, you are unmuted, by the way, everyone.
Thank you. I have a packet for you. Here. I think we now have a quorum. We've got Commissioner Epler on Zoom.
I'm
Okay.
here.
I know Commissioner Mills and Commissioner Chapel are both also planning to join, but I think whenever you guys are ready, we've got.
I just have to put you go. Are you ready, Mike?
I am, unless you want to wait. This is quick, so if you want to wait a few minutes, we can. See if Dan and Jessica show up.
I might miss the whole thing if we.
Dan.
Hello.
Yeah, it's really worth the wait.
I mean, we usually give me.
You're like, they were on this thing.
If we were on JFP.
They used to have it about Andy, Polka Standard Time with
Oh, that was HSD. Now we have JSD.
There will be no mercy for the.
I did walk in and say, are we recording? Because I was just gonna know what time I have back.
It must be really late that I beat
Happy.
you pulling down. Thank you.
Guess I didn't say up or down on paper, so thank you.
I just guessed. Okay, I figured I'd err on the side of caution.
I think you already signed that one.
So,
You did. My lord.
it's to you.
Thank you.
So are we all going to Sean's party after this?
I sounded more fun than-
I wasn't sure if this first item was a quick one, but it sounds like
It is, yeah. It's very just procedural. We got almost everyone. I think it's okay if you want to get started to do that. It's up to you.
All right, so we're
I'm
ready.
recording. Yep.
Okay. We'll call to order the December 7th, 2022 Cottonwood Heights City Planning Commission work session. And we will be reviewing the business session agenda items, which is project GPA 22001. And that's the only business item I have on the agenda. Are there any other discussion items that need to be brought up?
We'll have a few just like kind of staff updates to share afterward, but nothing for action or anything. So we
Okay.
could do that afterward if that works for you.
Great, and so we have Commissioner Epler on Zoom, and then we have 4 commissioners in the room. So we will, let's just go ahead and go over the first agenda item.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. This is an interesting one. It's very minor. It's a minor administrative matter that requires a legislative process. But we received, what happened, Sam?
We did warn you that it's just like I
Got a
think
formatting issue with my file here then.
we found that if you open up a slideshow in a different room and then shut your laptop and move rooms, sometimes it like doesn't reload.
Wow.
So
Hmm.
that's nice.
Well, one second.
You want me
No, I'll give the preface here. This is a very technical minor update to the adopted moderate income housing master plan that was approved by the city in 2019. Let me get it open here. That should work.
Yeah, looks like it's all there.
Okay, sorry about that. So I'll run through this here and give you an overview. We got a letter from the Division of Workforce Services, who is the state division tasked with monitoring compliance with affordable housing reporting requirements that are mandated now by the state of Utah. The state legislature tweaks that section of the state code just a little bit, or even more than a little bit, about every year. So the intention of that state code is very similar, that cities have to plan for and implement and report on the progress of, you know, what policies or steps is it taking to address affordable housing. But the way you have to report and the way you have to say it and the format of it change slightly every year. So the letter we got was saying, hey, you're your general plan element is not in compliance with the most recent state code. And when we dug into why it's out of compliance, it's really, very minor reasoning that I'll go over here.
We also found out it's like something like 75% of Utah cities had this issue come up.
Yeah, a lot
so-
of cities got a similar letter. So I don't know, something in how this is being managed at the state changed this year because a lot of cities were just kind of surprised, but to get this letter. The reason it's important to update it, even though it's minor, is that full compliance is required for access to certain transportation related funds. So they've given each city that's received this letter 90 days to amend their plan to be in compliance. As a reminder, this will go through Planning Commission and on to City Council. So again, here's a summary. It's a technical amendment to that 2019 Affordable Housing Plan. Of note, we do update reports on this every single year. So each year we come back with a report that updates population data and median income and housing stock and availability within different income ranges. So we have reports that are approved by the City Council every year, and they have been since 2019. That report on the city's progress towards these goals here. For whatever reason, this year they said, yeah, we did the report and submitted that and the report was fine. But they said, you actually have to go change your general plan element as well. So that's what we're doing. I think I've gone through all of that. Oh, and I will note that the changes that are in your packet as described there, the formatting is not final, but the wording is what's in that final plan. That's been reviewed again by the state and they found it to be okay. So the way we've updated it is okay now. Again, the commission's role is to hold a public hearing and make a recommendation onto the City Council. We published notices, general plan required notices 14 days ago or something like that within the deadline. Here's an example. I'm not going to go through all of this, but this is just an example of the extent of the plans, and I'll zoom in a little bit. So you can see one of the items here is this is the original plan on the left, and this is the updated plan on the right. They look very similar. And most of the plan is identical. We've gone through and marked, that's behind this little thing here. We've marked with an asterisk the areas that have changed, but you can see here, like the goal when this was adopted, say B here. The state code said facilitate the rehabilitation or expansion of infrastructure that will encourage the construction of moderate income housing. Well, years on now, the state code language is demonstrate investment in the rehabilitation or expansion of infrastructure that facilitates the construction of moderate income housing. 90% of the changes are of that nature, where it said the same thing before, it just now says it a little differently in state code now. Some of the words are different. So we just rewrote those
What
words.
does the new wording mean? Demonstrate investment in the rehabilitation or expansion?
I think reading through, this is a general theme, but the language now is a little more actionable. Instead of facilitate something, it's, hey, demonstrate that you've done it. If it's this right here, rezone density for densities necessary to assure the production of moderate income housing. Now it's rezone for densities necessary to facilitate the production. It's just a little more geared towards implementation and actionable steps as the years have gone on. And I would anticipate they'll be back at it this year in the legislature, with the same thing. It's a big topic every year. The other comment, so that was the first comment of non-compliance, is we just needed to update the implementation options to match the exact wording that's found in the state code. We've done that. The other one is when we, the state gives cities, it's like I call it a menu of tools that you can choose to adopt. You only need to adopt three or four as a city that you're going to focus on, but there's a list of, 20 or so different strategies to choose from. So we've updated the language of those. And then in the section of the plan where we are actually stating which options the city is prioritizing, again, we've updated the language to more plainly match the state code. Instead of calling it strategy 1, now we're calling it strategy E because that's how it's referenced in the state code. We've also formalized, because every city is required to allow accessory dwelling units as a permitted use now. That is one of the strategies. So we threw that in as a fourth strategy. We're doing it already. We might as well formalize it as a strategy. And then they wanted to see just more detailed outcomes and progress reports and measures for how these goals are being implemented. So we've included that language here. So the sections that are titled outcomes and measures and tasks are just more detail in the progress we're making and the tools we've set up to achieve it. And one of them, it's not in this, but there's a zoning incentives one, which we use our plan development district as a way to implement that, where a project is allowed more density or more flexibility in development. But one of the aspects is it has to provide deed restricted affordable housing. We've actually reported, hey, we've entitled 2 projects this way and 60 or whatever deed restricted affordable housing units are either under construction or entitled now. So we're just reporting on progress, which we thought, I think reasonably so, that we would do that in our annual reports and just report on the progress in those. The general plan would remain high level. They just wanted to see that in the plan. Those were the 2 biggest changes and what we needed to comply. The last thing we did, because the plan is in 2019, some of the data is older. So as an appendix, we just added, just for redundancy, I guess, the 2022 data that's in our 2022 report. That's now going to be adopted in the master plan as well, just as an additional appendix at the end. That's all it is. And again, the new language has been sent to the state. It's okay by them. So we just need to get this through the planning commission, take public comment if there are any, have the council consider it and send it back to the state, and then we're in full compliance again. Any questions on this one?
Just for my education, why would we as planning commission be involved in something like
Sure.
this?
Yeah, fair point. Technically, the way this is set up at the state, the moderate income housing plan is an element of the general plan. And the general plan is something that procedurally, if you adopt it or amend it, it has to go through planning commission on its way to council.
Okay.
So because it's considered part of a general plan, even though in this case it's kind of a standalone document, that's why you're
Okay.
considering it.
It's a weird situation where it's like, in some ways, the single most intensive process is amending a general plan, but this is like the most minor way to amend it. So it is like a weird.
Okay.
Just for clarification, you will see the full general plan, the big update we're working on, that'll come to you early 2023 to start that process. There will be a housing element in that, which we're going to take another look at this whole document and, make any substantial changes we think are needed in terms of housing and providing housing. This is just an update of what's already in place, but we'll do this again really in the next year to include as a brand new element as the full general plan update comes forward.
Can you bring up that previous slide for just a sec?
That one?
One more. Sorry, maybe back a couple here.
Yeah, you tell me
Numbers.
when. I've got the
It had the
whole,
numbers.
that one?
That one, yeah. I just said, obviously, this has no bearing on the motion, but it's just always a good benchmark to see how we're doing. And I just like that we're doing okay in certain areas, when we look at that number of the percentages of AMI, those bands. And I'm grateful that we've tried to be intentional about that, both at our level and at the city council level. So, obviously there's more that can be done, but
Yeah,
the fact that in that 30 to 50% and 50 to 80% that we're doing okay. And that, it's a little trickier at the bottom. Anyway.
yeah. So where it identifies gaps where we don't technically have enough units for the households, that very, very low income, you see that gap everywhere. That's a hard one. And actually 80% AMI and up, that's your other gap. I think I might need to update that number because I don't think that's right. But
I would really ask that one, make sure that when we get closer to general plan, that one we end up spending time on,
Yeah,
and I know
yeah.
the city council does too. So and also just remind us again where the AMI number comes from, because I know we put all sorts of bearing into that for what we do. So anyway, That was
Yep.
more just kind of an observation.
Sure, yeah.
I was curious about that. I mean, so with that, the 50 to 80,
Mhm.
that number, I mean, is that saying we actually have
What?
1,600 units that aren't?
Let me pull up
that are
the,
available? I guess I don't understand it. I
no,
don't know
well, that
if I'm the
square
only
was
one.
black, so. Pull up the actual 2022 report.
The Cottonwood Heights, good Salt Lakes. I think.
Okay.
Send them our way.
And that, so that category also was just rental units, that wasn't the,
Yeah.
you know, the owner occupied thing, so that may factor in, but let me check here. That one. Yeah, it's the same information there. I can dig into that. Cause that number looks a little odd to me. Where it's saying we have in the 50 to 80% AMI, we have 2,000 occupied rental units. But only 625 households that would qualify for that. What that can mean is that people in different income bands are actually renting within this one. So that could mean people that can't quite afford it are renting
Paying
maybe
more
above
than
it,
household
above where they can, and certainly probably people that could afford a higher monthly housing cost without being constrained are also renting in that. My guess is this is your, you know, apartment projects that their market rate for rent probably falls within what 50 to 80% AMI would be. And maybe they're not brand new apartments or updated. You know, I would guess your Santa Fe's and Boulder Hollows and a lot of the big complexes we have in the city would probably fall in that category.
I'm just proud that we're doing something.
Sure, yeah.
Whenever we talk about it, I mean, I know we talked about the future, but
Mhm.
I mean, it's good to point out that those large blocks of space with large amounts of rental units put a strain on city resources in about every capacity. And I think we need to pat ourselves on the back a little bit that we're doing our share in certain bands. That's not to say we can't do more in other bands, but you know.
Yeah, this is the website, so you can go in here and see the current plan and then each of the annual updates. So we post all this stuff online. We did, interestingly, the mayor and council asked us to look into how many housing units are single family versus multifamily, setting aside how much the housing cost is. But surprisingly, like a third or almost a third of the total housing units in the city are multifamily in some way. We used the stormwater fee data because that's really that went through every single property in the city to get that number. So it's not a population estimate from the census. It's not a regional projection. It's the actual numbers in the city. So, you know, that was interesting to see that actually a healthy percentage of housing units are multifamily. Now, one thing we'll look at in the general plan is the mix of the housing, because it's not as simple as you have your single family and you have your apartments, and that serves everybody, because apartments don't work for all families. And, you know, you want a variety of options based on age and, you know, family size and household size and things like that. So always a challenge and something we'll keep working on, but yeah. Great point.
That missing middle category of housing is
Yeah.
really important. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, it gets lumped into all of the, you know, bigger multifamily product. And it's not fair because, I mean, a fourplex feels very different in a neighborhood than a 200 unit apartment complex. But the fourplex does serve a need and is a reasonable product for consideration. I mean, thinking back to the Bengal Boulevard proposal that came in front of us with the duplexes, I still think that was a reasonable product for that neighborhood. And it's not, I mean, it's on the lower density of the missing middle, but still is part of that missing middle.
Sure. Yeah.
Somehow the way we talk about those kinds of projects needs to shift so that it doesn't encounter the same conflict that the larger apartment buildings do.
I
Yeah.
think we'll probably continue to see applications of that type. I don't think those are gonna necessarily go away, which I think is a good thing that they continue to exist because they can fill that niche, but with like a built out city that we have, I think we will continue to see those applications before this commission for more opportunities to look at that type of product, because a lot of the redevelopment we have is gonna be infill where you don't have room to build a 200 unit apartment, but somebody looking at doing a fourplex or
Yeah.
so I think there will be other opportunities to comment on that, and that's helpful for us to know that's something that is important.
Do you guys, within the 3 strategies that Cottonwood Heights selected,
Mhm.
do you feel like any one of those 3 strategies will change in the general plan, or do you feel like any of them are at risk of us not hitting the mark?
No, I think the 3, well, it's 4 that we have are good, and it's. One is using community reinvestment areas and the affordable housing set aside to invest in affordable housing. We've been directed by the council to establish those areas already, so it's something we're working on. The planned development district remains a redevelopment tool that has the affordable housing component. And then the other one was allow for, without saying the exact language because I don't know, but allow for housing within commercial areas and our mixed use. All of our future land use visions generally entail mixed use in those commercial areas. Scaling it and making sure it's at an appropriate mix and level is the key part of it, but they all have that residential component. So I just think naturally, as we keep following those plans, we will be able to achieve those goals through that way. Now, if the state comes in and says, no, you have to do more, you have to, to streamline this or prioritize it more and implement this quicker, then we'll have to reassess how we do it, obviously. And then accessory dwelling units is the other one. And we've got that process set up right now. You can always look at making things easier, making them more streamlined, but I think they're good goals. We just may expand or maybe change the perspective we're looking at them to, just to make sure they reflect the current community values. The big thing we talked about, we actually did a general plan update with the council last night, just a progress report. And the big theme is we need to plan. We are recommending that we plan for growth instead of reacting to it. And setting aside any specific numbers or anything like that, growth is happening. We've got a lot of statistics that say that. We'll feel the impacts of it one way or another. So if we plan for it, but plan for it in a way that makes sense for Cottonwood Heights, that provides a variety of housing types, it spreads out that growth and the impact of it throughout the city in a way that doesn't impact any one area more than others. That's how we can control that or shape that at a local level. And certainly, how do we provide a variety of housing types is a big part of that. And where do they go? There is a need or a benefit of having your higher density multifamily projects, but there's also a need to have twin homes and condominiums and ADUs serve a role for younger households, just getting started, and for kids that are growing up and don't want to move out of the city. So it'll look at all of that stuff, and the commission will be heavily involved in that. And that's where we'll come reassess the strategies and see, maybe our implementation measures or strategies can change it, if not the entire goal.
Anyone else have any questions or comments on this item?
Nope.
All right.
Okay.
Do we want to move on to the next?
Yeah, I'll give a
updates?
brief update. Dover Hill Drive, I think you'll see in January. They have a full subdivision preliminary application that has been submitted now. So we're reviewing that right now. So we're planning to notice that and bring that back for public hearing sometime in January. So you'll be seeing that shortly.
Will it have exceptions to the setbacks?
Just on those,
3 or 4.
yeah, I think it's what I showed at that last meeting, I think is on.
Sorry, I missed that.
Oh, yeah, I can show
I
it.
read through the
Got it.
minutes, but I
Okay.
tried to I mean, if there are any.
We've got time if you,
I can send you the link to the presentation that was
That
shared.
would be great.
If you
Right.
want,
Yeah,
leave it on the website, so
I don't have any concerns. These guys, they know.
I'll follow up,
Pretty,
just,
You know, I think.
No, but I
right.
think it's, I mean, we have time to talk about it, so let's talk about it.
yeah, so just to refresh you, this is what you
Yeah,
considered
yeah.
originally. They found a lot of fault lines. And you will be seeing a concept similar to this, which is still a planned unit development. The only setback exceptions are on these 4 lots, and these 3 here are interior setbacks. Their backyard would be Wasatch Boulevard. And then lot 9 here, the only setback exception they're seeking is adjacent to that Wasatch right of way. But all of these here are standard R18 lots.
Wow. That's
This,
like 100 times better.
this is 13 lots as opposed to 17.
Well, and those view lots, like what people want is that beautiful view of those mountains, and having a smaller backyard for the sake of having that view. I think that's a wonderful trade-off, and it doesn't feel like we're just like trying to just shoehorn in as much as possible. And I did have contact with a couple of residents that I saw this picture and I described it just conceptually. And they said, if there was access from Dover Hill Drive, that changed everything for them. Which that was really good, positive feedback. I mean, not to say that we won't have to go through the ringer again on this, but.
access to the park.
Access to the park from Dover Hill Drive. That whole extended neighborhood is a bunch of walkers and they all walk on Dover Hill Drive. Nobody walks on Summerhill. Nobody does.
Yeah, we were happy as staff, not that we have any say in it as far as what gets approved, but we were happy to see having frontage on both sides for the park, so we have just a little bit more accessibility instead of it being interior. So they
You will
just,
also see an actual park design. We've asked Ivory to,
Great.
we've given him feedback and hey, design this, how you would do it.
they just didn't quite have a full submittal for this meeting, so we figured it was better to wait till January so we could answer more questions rather than bring it in.
I'm wondering, did you guys talk through the slope lines at all? That was the other thing that caught my attention.
On the park?
elevation. Yeah,
Um,
because parks just like homeowner lots. You pay a premium for flat.
yeah, you'll see they have a more detailed grading plan in their actual
Okay.
submittal. You'll see that. And then they've done a kind of a cross-section view of how the elevation changes across the site. Just, I mean, you can tell right now the Dover Hill Drive sits much higher than 7650 South. So there is slope. They are proposing to grade it and have flat areas and kind of different levels of usable space. So you'll see that full design.
This one also, as we noted in the meeting where this came for just concept, keeps the pavilion, which we heard from a lot of people was like a priority for them. So that was something to point out as well, is that is able to be preserved by this alignment.
And a few parking stalls.
Yes, they're proposing some, I think, just right here, 5 or 6.
That's great. Well, just hypothetically, if we're partnering with these guys on this. But again, the grading, the parks in the city where we have slopes. That. It just decreases the usable space, so I would advocate.
Oh,
for-
sure.
Even if there's some type of a partnership, when we get further down in the execution phase of this. As much flat usable space as possible. Anyway, you know what I mean?
Yep,
When we get there,
absolutely,
that can
yeah.
be worked out later. but
Absolutely.
It is a slope, there's no doubt about
There
it.
will be slope there. It's how they catch it. and how
You got
they
it.
grade Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. We've had those discussions. I think they've done a decent job that they'll keep refining and you'll see.
Thanks for
Mr.
the,
Chappell?
I definitely think, like this, it always was it was flat at the top and then super tiered, everything behind. Getting from the back of the church to that pavilion. And frankly, if this becomes a nice sledding hill in the winter, I still think there's a benefit, right?
yeah, no doubt.
It's there's not a lot you can do with it if you've got to pass through.
Yeah.
People can walk their dogs and ride their bikes.
Yeah, I think we want to try to see
Fantastic.
some good circulation on it as much as we can with the slope, right? Where like people don't feel like they are trapped by the hill where they can't get across the site.
Mhm.
So I think we've talked internally as staff just about how do we make sure it's like accessible throughout the site? If you want to get down to that part of it,
Yeah.
what's your route? How are you going down?
You can
But-
see the two walking paths are, intended to to.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
hope that I think the slope can be kind of a feature in and of itself with like, some dynamic beauty as long as it's usable. So hopefully that balance can be straight.
That's gonna be so much. I mean, they're gonna be able to charge a premium for those. That's gonna be an absolute addition to that part of the city. Like that's. I mean, we've been confident that Ivory had that gear. I'm just glad it finally came out.
Yeah, we're excited to bring it back for like more of a full review in January and be able to dig into it a little bit more then.
Well, thanks for whatever back and forth with you guys and Ivory happened.
Oh, yeah, just, 2.5 years worth, yeah, just slowly inching toward progress here.
Sometimes it takes time.
We'll get there, it's a good project.
The only other update we had was just a really brief one on our mixed use project. So it feels like it's been a little while since we talked about it. So as kind of like a brief refresher, we got direction as staff from the city council to look at our mixed use ordinance that we currently have. And it was pretty broad direction. The sentiment was basically like, can you do a text amendment to require ground floor commercial? With the kind of the impetus for that being like, we don't want mixed use projects that are actually just effectively all residential with maybe some live workspace that isn't really publicly accessible. It's just basically used as more residential space. So we looked into doing that, had kind of a preliminary conversation with the commission over the fall. The feedback we got from you guys was really, really helpful in helping us kind of think through like, well, if we tweak it this way, there might be an unintended consequence in this regard, where if we require too much commercial space, does it become unaffordable? If we require too little, is it impactful? So that conversation opened up the project to be a little bit more detailed than we had initially intended. So we're just still researching it to try to think through that. We found some really good options, I think, for kind of like incentives and maybe trade-offs that we could look at to encourage people to hit that commercial minimum while still providing affordable units. But we're trying to vet it through other cities that have done that and what their successes or issues have been. And also trying to kind of vet it through context sensitivity for where our mixed use zones are and be like, okay, well, is this going to have an unintended consequence of a type of product that we actually don't want in that part? So it has become a bigger effort, and I think that's a good thing, but we just are still working on it. So the other piece of the puzzle is, you may recall, as part of our general plan update for the whole general plan, we're doing a form-based code. And that is another piece of this puzzle where it has some similarities to a mixed use code already. And so we're trying to think through how that's going to interact, and is the form-based code going to really just accomplish what this text amendment would do? Do we need to do both of them? So that's just kind of an overall update. It's very much being worked on, but I'm kind of hesitant to like just make a quick red line and change it without thinking through maybe the bigger context. So appreciate that. If anyone has additional thoughts on it or questions, you're always welcome to reach out to me, but we'll keep you updated as we learn a little bit more.
One thing I've seen is tying the mixed use or the commercial component to street frontage. Because if you end up with a wide site, you don't want to bury a bunch of commercial in the middle. You want
absolutely.
it along the edge. So
Exactly.
if a mixed use parcel has a lot of street frontage, then they need to provide a lot of commercial or more commercial. If they don't have very much street frontage, it doesn't make sense.
Absolutely. We've talked about that, where maybe the commercial threshold would only be required on in buildings that are on like an arterial frontage. We've talked about, would we want to designate like even nodes where we say commercial is required in these areas, but not on this corridor. We've talked about saying, well, maybe we could reduce the amount of commercial required if a project provides portable units or more open space. We've talked about, could the existing provision in the current code that allows you all to approve additional height only be awarded if a certain threshold of commercial is provided. We talked about reducing parking requirements for projects that meet the commercial, with the idea that there would be like daytime users and nighttime users where you might not need parking to the full extent for both. So we're really trying to run it through the whole ringer.
Yeah. Sounds like.
But if you have any other ideas, it's been like I really enjoyed working on it because it's complicated. So,
I like the geography component of it because I mean. You know, again, we don't know what's gonna land up there, but
Yeah.
stuff around the gravel pit is likely to be really, really high. High visibility, high exposure. I think we could demand a higher standard.
right,
If you're gonna do something on like Little Bengal Boulevard in one of these small little one of these little pockets we have. That same standard just, I mean, it doesn't give the developer many
yeah,
wiggle room. And I like the idea that with the form-based code that we could
exactly,
be a little more malleable. And even within Fort Union Boulevard from top to bottom,
yeah,
we just have different feels at different places where,
absolutely,
yeah, that's why I've kind of let go that, you know, the sections where it's turned into basically residential. I don't know that anybody's really doing any commercial on the first floor on many of those units. But as we got to certain sections of it, I'd be more reticent, you know, to just be satisfied with that. And I think if we're really trying to be committed to making it kind of a Main Street corridor.
yeah,
At this stage in, you know, 2023, there may be some places where we say, okay, in this area, let's based on form-based code, let's be a little more intentional about it and see if I mean, I don't want to destroy an area and say, well, it's not going to be developable based on the standards that we're keeping, but my gut is I don't think that's going to happen.
well,
We're not doing sugar house style development.
one school of thought that I think is worth considering, and as I mentioned, something we're looking into is. It's probably not like a blanket standard of the percentage of commercial that's gonna work everywhere, so. In more node areas where you have a lot of activity. That commercial might be really important and meaningful because you're gonna have users to actually come to it. If it's more like those linear stretches where you're not really having a ton of activity, is ground floor commercial going to really be used? Is it gonna just be driven by? And so those are sort of the interactions we're looking at. The form-based code really gets more into those nodes and like what do we want to see specifically in this area? And so that's why I'm kind of trying to reckon with like, do we really need to be doing both? Or is it something where we're going to be achieving this just through the form-based code? So I'll keep you all posted, but wanted to give you that brief update. Thank you.
Oh, we've got.
So we have a ton of minutes for you to approve in the business session.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
So I've been asked already about Hillside Plaza,
Mhm.
of course, because planning commission, so we should know everything that's
Sure.
going on
Yeah.
and we should know what's gonna happen there and of course. So what are the next steps
City's
or?
under contract to purchase it.
Right.
And in due diligence right now.
Okay.
There's a lot of due
So
diligence.
that's,
for-
you know, that's where it is now. The closing is a little ways out, but we've. You know, that's been the direction that staff has gotten, so that's the way we've gone. And then, you know, the intention would be to, then the city, this is just generally from what, you know, I've heard council talk about the city would master plan it the way it's envisioned and then partner, you know, do an RFP process with a development partner to implement the vision.
We're definitely not to that design phase yet. We're not really like the fun part. A lot of very granular due diligence of like, what's the mechanical system like right now in the existing building? What's the roof condition like? What are the tenant agreements for the current tenants? So that's really the update we've shared with people. We're looking into different funding sources. There's a few different grant options to kind of help with like the design costs of putting a plan together. So we're looking into those options. But
Thank you.
Have you had
yes.
any interaction with the property owners on the northeast, northwest and southwest corners of that intersection?
Yeah.
I was thinking long-term, trying to be a little visionary.
I've had a few of them just stop by to ask questions. We just showed that exact same update of like, we're not really to the interesting part yet. So I've just had them kind of incidentally chatting with a few people. I think you have too, but we'll definitely be doing a robust public noticing.
There's an element of it to make this work from the, you know, the financing and bonding standpoint. The council as the CDRA, which Commissioner Shelton will be familiar with, has to establish a community reinvestment area and an area plan. And it's not just Hillside Plaza, it's, you know, 40 acres or something in that area. To do that, which is on the seed area agenda for next week, just to establish the plan, we had to send notices out to all the parcels affected. So we've been getting calls of people saying, what is this?
Yeah.
Explaining what it is, that, you know, what it does, what it doesn't do. And, you know, just invite them to come to that hearing.
I
So
think
it's
it'd
moving
be
forward.
good to set up like a stub page on our website for the project, so we can direct people to there. We've done that with some of our bigger past projects, and that can be a good spot for people to check, so. Do that, once it gets going. Thank you.
That's exciting.
Yeah,
You think we're within a year of? I guess that the funding is a big issue, but do you think we're within a year of an RFP? Or putting
Oh,
an
hard to
RFP
say.
out?
Yeah, it's too early to tell, just based
Okay.
on, you know, reviewing all the documentation we have to, but it will be a priority to get that done as quickly as possible. I think that's, you know, what I'm comfortable saying.
That's great.
Yeah.
And then the other caveat, it sounds crazy, but you know, our other big potential node, communicating within reason what we can to the Walker Family Trust and just say, this will be down the street, this would be, there'd be some nice connectivity, and at least one council member that's just wants a trolley so bad she can't stand it. You know, what the connectivity would be throughout the city, you know, I mean, I think it's important to make sure that we are
Yeah.
intentional about every facet, you know, Fort Union master plan, I mean, checking all the boxes, I mean, it affects, it's such a big bite of the apple, I mean, it affects almost everything we do, public works, I mean, yeah, the policing, I mean, there's a lot of moving parts. to
there's a
something
lot of
this big.
support for it in most all of our area master plans, the plans we put together, not even just the namesake Fort Union plan, but it's all there. So could be a great project that brings to fruition a lot of goals that I think we've been putting in these plans. So I think that's an exciting opportunity for everyone, and definitely excited to work on it as staff. But in my mind, we're up to the fun part. It's just a lot of paperwork.
Is there any update in terms of communication with Walker Family Trust?
Not really,
Nope.
no, not recently.
All right,
Anything else?
does anyone have anything else? We have a motion,
To adjourn.
Second.
motion and a second, all in favor?
All right. You guys have a good little,
Break them.
yeah, like a good amount of time to stretch.
We're not coming back till 6, right?
Yes, yeah, we'll see you in the next one, Commissioner Evler. Thank you.
Okay.